Hey friends, so I think we would all agree that rejection pretty much sucks. Nobody likes it because as human beings, we all want to feel like we are special and different, and we are. That's not just stuff your mom tells you when you're a kid. Each person is unique and offers that to the world in a way that only they can. But aside from knowing this about ourselves, we also want to feel like we were chosen because of our uniqueness, etc. So when we're not chosen, when we are rejected, we will often tie up our self-worth in that. We feel slighted, like our value is suddenly lower, our stock is worth less. In other words, we feel like we're somehow not good enough. Listen, there's no shame in that game. We have all been there and felt this way and asked ourselves why we weren't good enough for someone who rejected us. But the thing is, and this is a big thing, the whole I'm not good enough routine is absolutely not true. And later you figure it out, but you're probably still going to feel that way for a little while anyway. It can be especially bad when you are a highly sensitive person or suffer from rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD. RSD is a real thing, especially for people who are neurodivergent. This is something I'm going to cover in a future video, by the way, so stay tuned for that. So, because we all know full well that rejection feels terrible, we often fear it, and as a result, we end up clinging to friendships and relationships that we intuitively know are not good for us. And coming as a shock to nobody, including us, those relationships eventually end anyway. And then this validates those beliefs you formed in your head that you aren't good enough or worthy enough. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, sort of like Oedipus on the road to Thebes, minus the whole accidentally marrying your mom thing, of course. Anyway, the hardest part of rejection is arguably what it does to your self-esteem, especially when you get hung up on it being somehow your fault. Staying in this space for a long time is absolutely terrible for your mental health, and it can take a while to get your feelings of self-worth and your confidence back. Sometimes a considerable amount longer than you were even dealing with the rejection or the person that rejected you sometimes. But how do you get over it? How do you move forward with your life and stop dwelling on what you will later realize was not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things? Well, here are 10 ways to do just that. Ready? Number 1. Recognize that rejection is a part of life. It happens to everyone. No, seriously. Think of the most attractive, wonderful, successful, seemingly perfect person you ever met. I guarantee you that that person has been rejected, probably several times. So I guess you could say this is the bad news portion of the video. It really does happen to everyone. So it's just one of those little things that you have to deal with. If I had Ben Franklin's number, I'd text him right now and let him know that he should amend his famous proclamation that nothing in life is certain except death and taxes, because rejection definitely is too. Number 2, do not blame yourself. So this is the hardest one, because you'll want to blame yourself, believe me. But look, rejection is not always about you. In fact, most of the time, it's more about the other person than anything else. Sometimes it's their inability to meet you where you are. Sometimes it's about them not knowing what they really want from anyone, including themselves. Sometimes it's about being emotionally stunted in some way. Sometimes it's about working through their own stuff. There are literally a million reasons that have to do with them, but not one of them is tied up in your value or your talent or what you have to offer. Your capacity to form emotional connections with people, to love another person, does not come from anyone else. It comes from within you. And when someone rejects that, you have to understand that you still have that capacity to give. It is still a worthy, beautiful gift of high value. A few months ago, I did another video about this subject called Your Ability to Love is Your Greatest Gift, and No One Can Take That Away from You. If you are struggling with rejection and the emotional fallout from it, it might help you a little to walk beyond this video to watch that. I'll link it in the description and make it easy to find. Number 3, accept what happened. Acceptance today is your first step towards a different tomorrow. Pretending it didn't happen doesn't work. Being in disbelief might happen to you involuntarily, but you can't stay in either, because we all live in reality. The more you prolong it, the more you try to dodge it, the longer it's going to take to process and get it out of your way. That's actually true for most anything in life, friends. but it's especially true for rejection. Now, I didn't say it was going to be easy. It's usually not, but it's necessary, and it's what's best for you to do for yourself. Staying in denial is not going to do you any favors at all. I don't know how else to say that. Number 4, process your emotions about it. I think one of the worst things we do as humans is consistently stifle our emotions and just put them on a shelf somewhere because you don't have time to deal with this right now, or whatever reason. But listen, bottling up your emotions, not just about rejection but in general, is not healthy for your mind or your body. It will manifest itself somewhere, because it always does. And you might not have time for it right now, but trust and believe that it will find a time for you. Usually the time it picks is the least convenient too. Like when you're going about your business and a minor inconvenience happens and you seemingly overreact because it triggers that pent-up resentment and anxiety and anger. So feel the emotions, even the icky, uncomfortable ones. Unbottle them, let them out in whatever way is most comfortable for you. Whether it be journaling or talking to a friend or a mental health professional, take charge of that portion of your self-care and your healing journey. Because if you don't, then who will? You owe that to yourself. Once you process them and feel out all of the things associated with them, you begin to truly heal. And then what happens, trust me when I say, and when that happens rather, trust me when I say, it will be a beautiful thing. Number 5, be patient and compassionate with yourself. Tell me if this story sounds familiar. In dealing with a big disappointment or rejection, some days you think you're completely over it and don't care anymore. And then some days you'll get angry and upset all over again, either because something reminded you of the event or hell, sometimes it just happens. And then suddenly you feel like you lost a lot of progress and you're annoyed with yourself because you thought you were already over it. This is normal. Grief is not linear, ever. This is especially true when you are grieving a person who is still alive. You will have ups and downs in the process, and the best thing you can do is stay patient with yourself, remain on that healing journey, and don't look at it as a setback. Look at it as an evolution. Either way, you are still heading for the finish line. Tell yourself that as many times as you need to. Number 6, put the attention you were giving them into yourself. Friends, when we hold people in high regard, we tend to also hold them at a different standard than we do others. Basically, we idealize them. Remember being a kid and having a raging crush on someone, maybe it was a celebrity or a kid in your class or whatever, and you felt like the sun rose and set on that person's head? And later on, you see them and you're like, oof, what the hell was I thinking? They really aren't that special. This is idealization in its simplest form. And when you grow up, you realize that ideas are not actually reality. Getting wrapped up in this is dangerous. For starters, nobody is actually perfect anyway. But when you idealize people, it can take up gobs and gobs of your mental energy. It can be hard to burst that bubble. Even when they do something that you perceive as a slight or a wrong to you. It's like we don't want to admit that our taste in people is kind of questionable sometimes. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you're stepping right over the things you used to trip on. And that definitely includes people. You'll come to realize that, they really aren't that special. It was you that made them that way, and since you gave that, you can also snatch that energy right back. And when you do snatch it back, what do you do with it? Turn it around and give it to yourself. Get in closer touch with how you feel, what you want, and what you want to accomplish. Learn something new. That thing you've always wanted to try it. That trip you've always wanted to go on, go. Whatever it is, embrace it. Because, listen, who is more deserving of your adoration and your time and attention than you are? Number 7, keep up with your physical health. This one is often overlooked, but it really shouldn't be. Stress and anxiety definitely have physical side effects, and they can get significantly worse over time. Don't let yourself spiral because you are so caught up in the after effects of the rejection. Make sure that you are taking care of all of you, including the physical part. Your body likes it when you're happy, and you can tell because you feel better overall. Am I right? So do what you have to do to get there, even if you can only do it one small step at a time. Number 8, do not allow that rejection to define you. Please repeat this phrase to yourself as many times as you need to. Remember that, as we discussed earlier, the rejection was most likely not about you to begin with. You cannot take it on and let it set the template for everything you do going forward from that. Keep the rejection in proper perspective. One person's opinion of you does not define who you are. One person's failing to see your worth does not then make it less. Just because someone else thinks something about you does not mean that it's true. If you keep hanging on to that rejection, keep using those emotions to make future decisions, you're going to end up rejecting yourself. This is something that we're going to talk about in our next video, by the way, so stay tuned. Number 9, figure out what you can learn from it and grow. You've definitely heard this, that in every mess there is a message. And when life stuff eventually happens, it is really important to search for that message. Why did this happen? What am I supposed to learn from it? And what can I do better the next time to make it easier to process? Life is a funny way of sending you the same old lessons over and over in different ways until you finally learn them. Some are definitely harder than others, but all are valuable and have something useful to teach you if you allow yourself to see them that way, as something that happened for you, not to you. Here's a little hint. When it comes to rejection, I can tell you that many times the message ends up being that you deserved better than you were accepting or settling for. Which leads me very nicely into the final item here, number 10. Come to terms with the fact that sometimes rejections are actually redirections. So often, friends, our ego makes us think that rejection is actually a much bigger deal than it is. It feels like the end of the world, the sky is falling and all that. And later on, when you've had some space and time from the situation, you realize, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Or better yet, you realize that the rejection was a giant blessing in disguise. The nicest gift you've ever gotten. It was just maybe wrapped in a gas station donut box that got run over by a garbage truck. Some things in life are just not meant for you. That's not actually a bad thing. But our egos tend to not really understand this. So we hold on, even though we know better. We sit in front of a closed door, trying everything that we can to get our hands on the key, desperately attempting to get it open again. We get upset and frustrated about it too, and throw everything behind that. But what's really behind the door that you are fighting so hard for? Do you really know? And more importantly, is it really worth it just to satisfy your ego to keep knocking? To waste your precious time and energy trying to find that key? Spoiler alert, most of the time, the answer to this is no. More times than not, you are fighting to open a door that has nothing behind it. Not a thing. It's an empty space. So it ends up being all for naught. You still don't win. You still don't get the guy or gal. And now you're just tired. Friends, I think we can sum this up simply by saying, if you're struggling to find that key, you're probably not supposed to find it. That is not your door. Keep going to the one that is, and you will see that that door will just open. You won't need to force it or convince it to do anything. And another little something I want to mention here. In your life journey, you will meet people who really like the idea of you, because you may be a good person who is kind and generous and honest, but they don't want to put any work in to be the friend or partner that deep inside they know you deserve. It's in spaces like this where you hear things like, "You're too good for me, I don't deserve you." And let me tell you something. When someone says that to you, you should absolutely believe them. That's probably one of the most honest things they'll ever say to you. Sometimes things don't work out for you because you simply deserve better. Make the space for that by letting go of the past and everything that comes with it, including the rejection. Let redirection do its thing. Trust the process and keep moving forward. So there you have it. 10 ways you can overcome rejection and get over it for good. I hope you found that information helpful. Next week, we will be talking about rejection again, but of a different variety. These videos are kind of related to each other, so make sure you tune in for that. See you then.